Today we're going to make the 4-inch bird block zipper pouch. I had quite the experience making this. You want to stay tuned, see what happens. I used a different zipper. This is not a Kimberbell zipper, and I ended up needing to make some adjustments. If you don't want to have to make any adjustments, I'm going to highly recommend purchasing the Kimberbell zipper, and it tells you in the instructions that you need the lace zipper, it says color cream, 10 inches long. Grab your zipper from Kimberbell if you have it. If not, and you have a fatter zipper, you're going to learn how to make the adjustment and make this cute zipper bag. Let's get started. This is a perfectly pieced project from Me Time Delivered, which is a Kimberbell company. All the information will be linked below. I bought the digital version, so my fabrics are going to look a little different. I have this bundle of Fairy Frost fabric. Here's the information. It's a Michael Miller fabric. If you've never seen Fairy Frost, it's sparkly. I've already cut and prepared all of my fabrics. When you're working with something that has colors and maybe you're not using the colors in the kit, I find it helpful to make a note wherever anything is different. You can see here I made a note that I'm using a yellow, and down here I'm using a peach. You'll also need some medium cutaway stabilizer, project batting, and a 5x7 hoop. Thread colors are here at the bottom. I've picked my thread colors to coordinate with the fabrics that I've selected, and this project uses a zipper. I have a zipper on hand. This is the zipper I'm going to use. This is a Missouri Star fancy zipper. I have some of the Kimberbell zippers, but they weren't long enough for this project. I already have my hoop here and my batting. Let's go ahead and load our medium cutaway stabilizer. Load your stabilizer, hand tighten, screwdriver tighten. And before we go over to the machine, grab your piece of above the zipper fabric. This is the 2x8. It says to fold it together lengthwise, wrong sides together, and give it a good press. Here's what that looks like. It's my first time working with this Fairy Frost. You can see the shiny sparkly in it. It is leaving a little bit behind on the ironing board. When I pressed it, I put a piece of scrap fabric over it to keep from getting any of this sparkly stuff on my iron. I'm on a baby lock meridian. If you hear any background noise, I've got a load of laundry going as usual. It'll stop soon. I'm going to go ahead and hit embroidery. It's on a USB. I need to find my perfectly pieced May 2025 bird block, and then we need the 4-inch zipper pouch right there. And on my machine I have to hit set. We don't need to add anything additional. The whole project is in that file. Embroidery. I'm ready to go. We're going to start by stitching our batting placement lines. It does say to use a visible thread. I have a beige thread on there. This is white. It'll show up. Once these lines are stitched, you want to take your project batting and put that down, covering all of those lines. We're going to put that back on, and then we're going to stitch the tack down line. Once you've stitched your tack down lines, trim away the excess on the outside of those tack down lines. I looked through the instructions. It doesn't say anything about this little piece in here, so let's not touch that. Let's just trim around the outside of our project. Once you've got everything trimmed, put it back on your machine, and we're going to stitch the piecing template. Everything is stitched out for the piecing template. You want to have your instructions handy. This little diagram will help you. It's going to show where all of the fabric goes. We're going to start right here, number 9, page 2, and this is where we're using the color of the bird body. I need to change my thread color. Match whatever fabric you pick to whatever thread you pick. It tells you to place your piece 1 fabric right side up, centered over section 1. If you go back to your instructions, piece 1 is the 2.5 by 3.5. I've got that here, and we want to place that over section 1 right side up. Look at your little birdie diagram. Here's section 1. Got my fabric. I'm going to place it right there. It sticks really good to the batting. If you want, you can add tape. I'm going to double check, make sure the entire section 1 is covered. We're going to stitch a short straight line. That's called the trimming and placement line. Once that's stitched, you're going to trim off this extra piece. Now we need our piece 2 fabric. Let me show you how I labeled my background fabrics. I have some pins. I used a Sharpie and I drew numbers on the pins. I use this for my regular quilting projects as well. It's a great way to secure those pieces of fabric and make sure everything's marked. You need your piece 2 fabric. Grab your piece 2 fabric and you're going to want to place it right side down and center it right along that stitching line. I am going to put a little piece of tape on that. Taped it right there just to make sure it doesn't slide. I'm going to put this back on my machine and we'll go ahead and stitch the seam. Our seam is stitched. I'm going to take off the tape. You want to flip it right side up and press it. I'm going to use this little Clover Seam Roller so I don't have to get up and go to the iron. If you want to press it with your iron, take it off your machine. Don't melt the bed of your machine. Once that's pressed, the next step is to stitch another trimming and placement line. That's how we're going to build a bird. We'll be stitching trimming placement lines, trimming the extra, placing the next piece, flipping it out and pressing it and repeating the process. Trim the extra fabric. The line does extend beyond your fabric, that's fine. It shows it like that in the instructions. So trim off this excess outside fabric. That's all trim. Grab your piece 3 fabric. That's the next piece of your bird body fabric. Right side down, center it along that stitch line, and then we'll stitch the seam. Remove tape if you used any of that. Flip it, press it, and then we're going to stitch the next trimming and placement line. You'll have just a little bit of fabric here. Go ahead, trim that off. Grab your piece 4 fabric, right side down, centered along that stitch line, and then stitch the seam. Remove your tape if you used any. Flip it, press it, and then we're going to stitch the next trimming and placement line. Same thing again, trim this outside flap. Once you have that trimmed, you're going to grab your piece 5 fabric, lay it right side down, centered along that line, and stitch the seam, then fold out and press. Stitch your next trimming and placement line. Trim the extra, and then you're going to want your piece 6 fabric, and you're going to do the same thing. Right side down, centered along the stitch line, and stitch the seam. We're going to continue with this process until the bird body is built. Since it's the same steps over and over, I'm going to move through this and set it to music, and then we'll come back when it's time to put down the wing and we'll talk about applique and stitching the wing. We've got our bird put together. Everything is down and pressed. We're on number 50 on page 5. We're going to stitch a block outline. I'm going to change the thread to white because I've got the white background. Our outline is stitched. I'm going to go ahead and change my thread color. My bird wing is a peach color, pinky peach. I'm going to change the thread, and then I'm going to stitch the bird wing outline. Got your little outline for your bird wing. Place your bird wing fabric, which is piece 10, right side up. Make sure you're completely covering that outline, and then stitch the tack down. Once the tack down is stitched, you want to trim all the excess fabric that's outside of that line. I've got that trimmed. One thing I do notice is I can see a little bit of shadowing from the darker color underneath. If that's going to bother you, put the fusible backing on this. Back on the machine, I'm going to stitch the wing decorative outline. The next thing we're going to stitch is the bird quilting details. There's a thread change here. They have this gray, browny color looking thread. I'm going to go back to the darker pink color that I have for the bird body and use that and stitch the decorative wing detail and the detail here on the bird body. Our next step is the background quilting detail. I have a white background, but I would like this to show up but not really be very bold. I have this sort of pale gold color. I'm going to use this for my quilting detail. Once your quilting is done, change your thread. We're going to stitch out the beak and the legs. Once the beak and the legs have stitched, change your thread again and stitch out the bird eye. We're going to start building the sides of the bag front. We're going to be placing these two pieces of fabric. You want to change your thread. I'm going to use this blue. It matches the fabric that I picked and it'll make it show up easier for the camera. I have my thread changed. I'm going to stitch the side A trimming and placement line. Once that's stitched, go ahead and trim your extra fabric, and then after your fabric is trimmed, you're going to take your side A fabric, right side down, center it along the line, stitch the seam, flip it out and press it, and then do the same thing on that side. I'll go ahead and set all of that to music. We're up to step 70. We're going to stitch the bottom tack down line, quilting detail, and cut line. I'm going to leave the blue on the machine. I want the quilting detail in blue, and since this is a tack down and this is a cut line, at the end you're not going to see either one of them. I'm not worried about changing colors. I am going to take a moment and secure the side edges, these two side pieces of fabric. It doesn't say you have to do that. Everything is stitched out. We're going to take this over to our cutting table. Don't take it out of the hoop. What we need to do is get a ruler and a rotary cutter. I'm going to grab a smaller ruler and a smaller rotary cutter for this. This is a 28mm Olfa rotary cutter, 5-inch square ruler. We want to cut through the fabric and stabilizer on the cut line. That's the last line that just stitched, and extend that cut 1/2 inch on each end. So go about a 1/2 inch past each end of this cut line. You're not going to be able to lay a ruler flat because it's in your hoop. What you can do is look for the end of the stitching. It ends about there, and then you can use your ruler and measure that 1/2 inch pass that you need, and then sort of like lift your ruler and hold it down at an angle, and that will help you make the cut straight along that cut line. Obviously I'm going to have to move my ruler after I go about halfway. It says to cut through the fabric and the stabilizer. I can go about that far. I'm going to slide my ruler, and I can see this one easier where it ends. Make sure I'm extending that 1/2 inch beyond, which is difficult to do with the rotary cutter. If you have a big rotary cutter, you're going to have to do that with scissors. You're not going to be able to make that 1/2 inch beyond cut. Oh, look at that. Go ahead and take my tape off. I should have done that before I did the cutting. And that's fine. We're going to be doing something else with this step. We're going to be getting rid of the fabric here in a minute anyway. I just got ahead. Now we want to cut to the right 1/4 inch on each end. It shows the line here that you just cut right along that line, and you went a 1/2 inch beyond. And then to measure 1/4 inch this direction, so towards the bird feet, and to make 2 small cuts. I'm going to turn this. So you need to find the end of your cut and then cut 1/4 inch. I'm kind of eyeballing it. It's 1/4 inch. So you've made your straight cut here, 1/2 inch past, and a cut going 1/4 inch this direction toward the bird feet. Then it tells you to remove any fabric, which I already did. You saw that when I took my tape off, the little bits of fabric already came off. So if you have any fabric that's right here along this line, get rid of that fabric and stabilizer to the left of the cut line. So the fabric came off really easily. I need to turn it over, and it's telling me to remove any fabric and stabilizer to the left of the cut line. Don't cut all of this out. This is holding it in your hoop. I think you just need to cut this little bit out. It's this tiny little strip that's underneath this strip of batting. It has to do with attaching the lining and the zipper. So we want to get rid of this tiny little strip of stabilizer. I'm going to use scissors for that. So there's that piece. Now the little bit of batting is being held down by those tack down lines. Let's cut this stabilizer out. Got my little piece of stabilizer out. You can see the batting and you have an opening. We're going to flip back to the front. You need to get your lining below the zipper fabric. For me, that's a yellow fabric. If you're following the instructions, it's this color fabric if you have the fabric kit with it. Lining below the zipper, the 5x8 piece, we want to place it right side down, aligned with that cut line. Right side down, aligned with the cut line. Just like that. Then we're going to go back to our machine and we're going to stitch the lining below the zipper seam. So it's going to stitch a seam right here. Then we're going to flip it and press it. The seam has stitched. It says to flip it right side up, press well. I'm going to continue to use the little roller, and then we need to tuck the lining fabric through the cut. So remember that cut you have right here? Put your lining fabric through that. If it doesn't fit up here or down here, you can just snip it a little bit more to make sure it slides through. I think I'm going to be okay though. Carefully pull that through. That fits just about perfectly. I'm going to lay that down again and give it one more little press right there. Once you have that pulled through, we're going to turn our hoop to the back. It says to smooth the lining fabric over the left side of the project. This is lining, so you can see how it's going to align this, since this is the outside of the bag, this is the inside of the bag, and this is your lining fabric. You've just created the lining. It says to smooth it this way, align the seam with the edge of the cut. We just did that, that looks good. And then it says press well. If you're going to press this, you're going to need to place something underneath it because it's raised off the surface. If you just take this to your ironing table and push, you're going to push that stabilizer down and mess up the project and the hoop. I'm going to put my hand underneath it and get my roller and just do this with it. And then it says to tape the corners and the edges in place. It shows tape here, across the corner, along the bottom, across the corner, and on the side. Got my pieces of tape. It's like Edward Scissorhands, but with tape. I couldn't resist the bad joke, sorry. I'm going to put one there, smooth it, and I'm going to grab the bottom, and I'll do the corners last. Smooth it. And one thing that's funny that I didn't notice when I cut this fabric, the selvage is right here. I can see the little dots. It doesn't matter. It's the inside lining of the fabric. The only people who know are the people watching this video. We're all taped. We're going to go back to our machine and stitch what they're calling the lining below the zipper tack down line. It's going to go over here again. What that's going to do, now that we have this fabric tape, it's going to tack down this lining below the zipper fabric. Once you've stitched that line, go ahead, flip over to the back and remove all of your tape. Once your tape is removed, go ahead and flip your project back over. You need your above the zipper fabric. That's the one we folded and pressed at the beginning. It says to unfold the above the zipper fabric and place it right side up, aligning the crease with the left side of the opening. The left half of the fabric that's on the bottom of the screen, my left is over here, will cover the left side of the project and to tape into place. After we have this lined up, we're going to be tucking this through and taping it in place. I'm going to tuck it through first. I think that's going to be easier. I'm going to go ahead and put this through the little opening we have, and I can see my crease like that. So this is the left side of the opening. Going ahead, lining it up. That's much easier for me than trying to line it up and then tucking it through. Making sure that crease lines up right here with that part of the opening. So just like that. See how I have this little yellow stripe? If you don't like the way that looks, you need to match your lining to the outside of your bag or have something that's similar in color. We are going to put a zipper on it, but remember, the zipper is a lace zipper. The zipper is going to go right here. It's going to cover that, but you can see a little bit of yellow color through that. For me, it doesn't bother me. In the grand scheme of things, that's not a big deal. Make sure your fold is lined up with that side of the opening, and then we're going to need to tape that into place. It has you taping this side here off to what is your left and making sure that that's in place, and then flipping to the back, making sure it's pulled and tucked through correctly, and then taping top, bottom, and right along this side. So let's tape this, and again, be careful when you're working on the back side of your projects. You don't want to mess up your stabilizer. I saved my pieces of tape from the front. That looks good. I'm going to flip it back. Let's turn it around. It has us putting a piece of tape over the opening to prevent the presser foot from catching. I need to get a long piece of tape, place that over the opening, and it also shows two small pieces of tape like over here. I'm over taping. That's okay. We're going to go back to the machine and stitch the above zipper tack down line. That's going to stitch here, which is above where the zipper is going to go, and then we'll come back here and we're going to remove the tape just from the front and go to the next step. We just stitched that line. You want to remove your tape from the front of your hoop. You're going to need your zipper for your next step. It says to place the zipper with the teeth centered on the opening. So your opening is right here. It's nice and easy to see since I used that yellow fabric. That's working out good. So place your zipper with the teeth centered on the opening and the zipper pull to the bottom of the hoop. Be sure the pull, this is the zipper pull, and the zipper stop are outside of your stitching area, which is easy to do. This zipper is plenty long enough. You can check. You can see the center of your zipper. Make sure it's in the right spot. I'm actually off a little bit. I'm going to pick that up, center that over that opening, and kind of roll it, and making sure that I'm matching the center of the zipper with this opening right here. That yellow fabric is actually really helping a lot. And then we're going to go ahead and tape that. Want to make sure this is nice and flat. And then we're going to stitch the zipper tack down line. The zipper tack down line is going to go back and forth on each side of the zipper. I'm going to change to white thread for this step. Making sure again the tape is pressed into place. I'm going to sit here and babysit this. I would not get up and walk away from your machine when this is happening. I'm going to go ahead and stitch two lines. Looks like it's going to go this way first, and then it's going to go this way. Do you see the problem I have here? This is not a Kimberbell zipper. It's different in size. My machine's getting ready to stitch that second tack down line, and instead of stitching it out here where it needs to go, it wants to stitch right on top of the zipper. So what do I do at this point? I'm back at the starting point for this design. Up at the top on my screen, let me show you this, I can see 5 by 7. If I edit this and try to shift it over, it's not going to let me. Watch. Let's say I try to move it over a couple. That's probably enough shifting to get it to put that one line where I want it to go, but it's seeing the entire design. So I'm going to hit OK, And when I hit the embroidery button, change to a larger embroidery frame, because now it's outside of that area. I'm in a 5x7 hoop. That means my only option right now to tack down the zipper that I'm using is to stitch it on my sewing machine while it's sitting in the hoop. So let's do that. I'm here at my sewing machine. I need to keep this in the hoop. I need to slide that under. It'll fit. I have a knee lift on this machine. I can see about where to place it. The stitching that it did on the embroidery machine went straight through the center of the design. I'm going to do the same thing here and make that even. It butts right up against the zipper. So I'm going to use the zipper as a guide for my presser foot. I'm going to go ahead and go back and forth a little bit and stitch down. That blends right in. I can see it on the back. I actually can't even see it on the front. Now this thread I can really see because this is the polyester embroidery. This thread is a 50 weight Olfa white. Since the thread with the embroidery machine went back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, it's repeated over itself a few times. I'm going to run this one more time to make sure it's tacked down. There we go. You can try to pull it and yeah, it's tacked down. Now we're ready to go to the next step. So if that happens to you, if you're using a different zipper and you have any problems, this works fine, no problem. Just make this slight adjustment, tack it down in your sewing machine, and let's go to the next step. Just for comparison, I do have some Kimberbell zippers, but they're only 8 inches long. It said you needed a 10-inch zipper. I went ahead and pulled one out of the packaging. Can you see the difference? This is why it didn't work. See how narrow this zipper is compared to this zipper? This zipper is a lot wider for the zipper teeth, and obviously it's wider on either side. That's why that tack down didn't quite work for this zipper. Go ahead and remove your tape that's on either side. You want to open your zipper 3/4 of the way. It shows it's sitting right about where the beak is. Go ahead and open your zipper. I think I have some tape right here. Yep, don't get tape caught in your zipper. You definitely don't need that at this point. And then one thing I like to do when I work with zippers, even though you probably don't have to, I just want to make sure that this stays out of the way. That way I know it's not going to move or flop around at all when I'm finishing my project. Grab your back fabric. It says to place it right side down. You're going to cover the entire project. And then you're covering your zipper, of course. This will be interesting. I'm curious to see. I think I'm going to catch some of the zipper, because if you look at the picture, see the picture, how it's close to the top, and that's the Kimberbell zipper. So if I lay the Kimberbell zipper down, I think this is going to end up, ironically, tacking down my zipper in the process. We'll go ahead, cover this up, and I'm going to tape this. It doesn't say you have to, but I'm going to tape this, and then we'll go back to the machine and we're going to stitch the back tack down line. I'm right here on this tack down step, and I can already see the zipper back here. I'm going to have to be really careful. I may even have to stitch that tack down line on my sewing machine. Let's see where it stitches and make adjustments if needed. See that? I'm going to have to do part of this on my sewing machine. What I'm going to do is cut the thread. I will seam rip that, but for now I'm going to advance it. Let's move it. I want to stitch the bottom part if I can. Right about there. So let's stitch that, and then I'll probably have to advance it again. I think it's going to go around twice. And then I'm going to have to finish this part on my sewing machine. This is an interesting, unanticipated adjustment. Here we go. I'm going to stop it right there. Cut my thread. I'm going to advance it again. That's That's a little too far. Back it up a little bit. Right there, and I'm going to let it run the second row of stitches, and then I'm going to complete this on my sewing machine, and I can see where it's supposed to stitch. So at this point, if you use the Kimberbell zipper, you've got a nice rectangle. I don't. I have to get a seam ripper and open this up and then go to my sewing machine and complete that stitch. I went ahead and pulled the thread out. I left one little piece in it. Here's the thread I'm going to point to with my seam ripper. Right here. If I fold my zipper over, it's at about the same place as the line that I stitched on my sewing machine. And you remember, it wanted to stitch on top of the zipper, but my zipper was too big. So for these final steps, I need to complete this project on my sewing machine. But let's talk about, if you use the right zipper, what you're going to do. If you use the right zipper, you're going to have a full box around your project at that point. I'm going to go stitch that part on my sewing machine, and then I'll come back because we have an additional step. I'll show you what to do. The only difference being when we do the final stitching, I'll stitch it on my sewing machine. Again, I'm only doing this because I have a zipper that's too fat. You want to use a Kimberbell zipper for this project. Since I'm going over a zipper, I actually sew a lot with zippers. I usually go back and forth a few times over them to make sure it's anchored. You'll see me do that. I'm going to start just before where the embroidery machine stitching stopped. I want to make sure everything's anchored. I'm going to go forward. And I'm going to go backwards again over my zipper, slowly. Whenever you're doing sewing with zippers, slowly. That's as far as I can go. When I turn it, what I'm going to do, it's perfect. It's hitting right there against that zipper. That's where I'm going to let it sew. You can see the presser foot just kind of crunch down. I'm going to go ahead and go all the way down. I can see where that ends. Now I don't think I'm going to be able to rotate. Yep, because I'm in the hoop. So what I'm going to have to do is do this line from here to here. I'm going to go ahead and go back and forth. Cut my thread. Do you see this? I need to sew here. However, I know I'm not going to do the very last step in my hoop. I could take this out of the hoop at this point. I should have done that from the beginning. I'm going to take it out of my hoop. Don't do that if you're still working on your embroidery machine. There we go. Let's go back to the table. Pretend it's still in the hoop. This is what you're going to see if you're still working with it on your embroidery machine. You just stitched that line. It tells you to turn to the back and remove the tape. So I'm pretending this is still in my hoop. I'm going to turn it to the back. You've got your lining fabric here and you're above the zipper fabric here. Go ahead and remove that tape. Once you have all the tape removed, you want to grab your lining back fabric. Here's my lining back fabric. We want to place it right side down and tape the corners and edges in place. Again, if you're doing this on your machine with the correct zipper, this is still in your hoop. Right side down, you want to go ahead and tape, and I am going to tape it because it will hold it in place while I do my final stitching. Once the tape is on, you would flip it back to the front. It would look like that. Well, your zipper would be like that. You get the idea. And then you stitch the final outline, and it leaves an opening for turning. So the final outline has an opening down here. It goes up like that, over and over. I'm doing this on my sewing machine. I have to leave myself an opening. I'm going to grab a couple of pins. I have big hands and I find the openings are never big enough, so since I'm off the hoop, I'm leaving myself a bigger opening so I have an easier time turning it. I'm going to put a pin here and a pin here, and I'm going to go to my sewing machine and I'm going to imitate the stitch that would have happened on the embroidery machine. It's going to go here, 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 and here. And then I'm going to go back and forth at the start and stop points. At this point, take your project out of the hoop. You want to go ahead and flip over, remove the tape, Get all that out of the way. Once you've got all your tape off, you want to trim 1/4 of an inch away from that final outline. Grab a ruler. This is a Creative Grids 2.5 by 12.5 ruler. It has this nice line on the 1/4 of an inch, so I can line it up right on top of that stitching line. White thread on yellow fabric is a little hard to see. I'm going to go ahead and get my bigger rotary cutter. And you want to do that all the way around. I have a zipper here. I'm going to switch cutters. I have one cutter that I designate for cutting sticky things, paper, zippers, and I use less expensive blades on it that I buy in bulk. Now that you've got it trimmed, you can clip your corners. Try not to clip your stitching line. If you do clip your stitching line, put it on your sewing machine. Sew it, and you'll be fine. No big deal. It can't be any worse than what I just had to do. I like to trim the corner and then trim a little bit extra. Everything is trimmed. We're going to turn it right side out. On your instructions, we're on page 9, number 94. Carefully turn the project through the opening in the lining to expose the inside of the pouch. So you've got a couple of spots here. Turn it like that. That's your lining fabric front and back. So flip it through the lining, and then when you have it flipped, the lining is going to be on the outside on both sides. Just be careful not to push through your fabric. You want it to look like this. Here's the lining, and here's that top piece that's above the zipper. I have a Clover point turner. I also have a purple Thang. You can use a pen with a cap on it. If you've got long enough fingernails, you can use fingernails. You can use scissors if you put some batting over the top. Don't poke a hole in your fabric. Get it all turned so it looks like the picture. What we need to do now is fold the raw edges together on the bottom and get that stitched closed. You can hand sew it or do it on the sewing machine. I'm going to do this on the sewing machine. One thing I noticed, I'm a little short on my fabric. Go ahead and tuck it and tuck this. That's fine. That's fine. I think I can pull it and make it work. It'll work. Here's what I opted to do. Here's the side with the folded edge. That was long enough. The side that was short has the nice finished selvage edge. I didn't have enough to fold it under, but it's not going to come apart because I have that nice finished selvage edge there. I do have a serger. If I was making this for a gift, I'd either start over and make another one, or if I was in a crunch, I would just run this through my serger. Once you've got that sewn together, go ahead, make sure your zipper's all the way open, turn it right side out. We are on the last step. This will be fun to see what this zipper looks like. I would definitely recommend the Kimberbell zippers for this project. It's made to work for with those zippers. If you have a fatter zipper, you're going to have to do what I did and make some adjustments and do a little work on your sewing machine. But honestly, it wasn't hard. It was some simple straight line sewing. Here's my little birdie bag. Let's get a look on the inside at that lining that didn't quite reach. Let's look. You can see a little bit of the white, but I have two nice clean edges thanks to that selvage edge. It ended up not really mattering. Thank you for joining me making the 4-inch bird block zipper pouch from the May 2025 Perfectly Pieced digital edition. I hope you enjoyed it despite the adjustments I had to make, but now you know how to make this. If the only zipper you have is wider than the Kimberbell zipper, you can make some adjustments and finish it on your machine. I would just cut your lining fabric a little bit bigger so you don't end up short on the inside. Please like, subscribe, and share. I will be bringing you perfectly pieced doorstep delivery starting in July. I am skipping over the June unless I get a lot of requests for it, then I can buy the digital edition. I'm going to go right from May to July. I'll also be working on the runner for this. I'll work it in over the next month or so. I've got lots of fun stuff planned, including using our clear blue tiles, Christmas in July, and a spooky quilt coming this fall. Thank you so much for watching. See you next time.